就是你给人包养的，你要什么都刻薄，你可以说你特别好，
But they say that. Like the guy was humiliating everyone. Like even to people who just didn't want to. Then at some point, so that last and he didn't even start translating. Then at some point, like, so does anyone want to see my presentation? He went right in front of the slides, he wrote all the slides, and then he just keeps going. So in the first one, he was like, blah, 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 blah. Next to the blah. He reached the end, he was like, okay, so let's see. I was like, seriously? Like,
Yeah, textures. Maybe it's just to make them short, because if you don't that's the only way I can
当然要找人提供思路和你的剩下的东西要外包。你比如说，一定要找单位的好的，因为你自己写。但是他做了一个经济，他的话语一直是那些你看那些最好的，就是最好的怎么样，就是那种培育技术这些，他们讲的效率，还有他们写的方式。
No, as I said, the person that just these folks have. I just don't have to touch. Okay? So we finished the revelation. And we said that, okay, if we're looking through all possible mechanisms, we can restrict our attention to these truthful ones. Because conversely, if no truthful direct mechanism exists, right, we know that there's no mechanism that satisfies our social choice function. Because we know that if there exists a non-direct mechanism or non-truthful, there always exists an equivalent truthful one that satisfies our social choice function. Therefore, if there's no truthful mechanism, then all hope is lost. Okay? There's no mechanism. So we can focus our attention to truthful direct mechanism. If no such mechanism exists, then the social choice function cannot be implemented. So that's the main kind of implication of the revelation principle. Okay, so it's logic. Right? So if A, then B. If not B, then not A. Right? Simple logic. So then there's this famous theorem that throws a bit of mud in the water. So it says that if we have at least 3 possible outcomes, right? And remember we had 27 in our small example, and we have at least 2 players, okay? Then let f be a social choice function such that for all x in x there is some type profile where a certain outcome is achieved. So all possible outcomes can be achieved by certain combinations of types. Okay? Then f is strategy proof with respect to the set of all type profiles if and only if f is dictatorial. Okay? So that means that under these situations, the only possible social choice function that we can satisfy is one that is dictatorial. Okay? So the social choice function that we wanted to satisfy was maximizing social welfare. Okay? Well, this one is saying, no, can't do that, sorry. Can only satisfy dictatorial ones. Now, what are dictatorial ones? Dictatorial ones are essentially ones that you select one of the plays randomly, not based on their preferences, and you take their preferences and maximize their utility only. Ignore everyone else. So one play in the game determines the outcome, and that play is determined in a random manner. So the social choice function is dictatorial if there is an agent I such that if there was some individual i's, there is an agent I such that if there is some individual I such that f always chooses the one of i's before, that in a sense it doesn't really make sense. But anyway, so the idea is that essentially what the intuition is that for all non-trivial mechanisms, the social choice function cannot essentially be satisfied. Okay? So that's the problem. Okay. So the question is, so we were asking ourselves, is there a direct truthful mechanism that takes, we ask for the report, and then and always imputes the outcome that we like. And the theorem says, in general, no. Unfortunately, no. Bad news. So this could have been the end of mechanism design research, right? Except that it's not. So there are ways around this theorem. Okay? So this theorem is set up for any general type of preferences. So for any utility function of the agent, and for for dominant strategy mechanisms. So not dominant strategy, for deterministic mechanisms. Okay, it's kind of deterministic because you select the only thing that's not deterministic is that you select agents randomly. So we can circumvent this theorem by looking at probabilistic social choice functions, so like lottery style kind of dictatorships. Or we can weaken solution concept, or, and the one we will focus on, is restrict the domain of preferences. So the theorem, and that's often in economics, the theorems are very generically set up. That means that if you find one example that doesn't work, the theorem already holds, right? So you only need one example where the mechanism, you can't find a certain compatible mechanism because the utility functions are a certain way, and therefore, the whole kind of idea collapses. But we can look at special cases, and in special cases, we could do more. And one of these special cases is where we restrict the kind of preferences that we're looking at. And so we don't just look at any utility function or any kind of games, but we are looking at utility functions where we have money. We're going to use money to incentivize people, okay? we didn't talk about money so far, right? So okay, so yes, I talked about the options and examples, but when I'm looking at designing games for social choice functions, we didn't necessarily say, okay, we have money. So we're looking at utility functions where people have preferences for money. And this money is called transfers in the mechanism design literature. Okay. So there's transfers. There's money being transferred from the mechanism to the players. Okay. So we're looking at those particular situations, and hopefully we have some more positive results for these kind of settings. Okay. So so the setting that we're looking at is a specific type of utility functions. So the mechanism that we are looking at now are mechanisms with transfers, okay, where we have, as before, we have a mechanism that determines the preference, takes as input the preference profile as before, but it calculates two things as the outcome. So one of them is the outcome that we had before, the allocation, who gets what, and another thing that's determined by the mechanism is these transfers, these payments. So it could be payments that some players have received money, and other players had to give money to the mechanism. Okay. So the mechanism collects transfers from the players. Okay. So now it includes the social choice function we had already, and now we have another function which determines these transfers. Okay. And there's another assumption we're making. So we're now assuming we have the transfers, but these transfers would be useless if they didn't have some sort of effect on the preferences of the agents, right? If you don't care about money, you still can't incentivize. You can't use that to incentivize people, right? So we have to make an assumption that you care about money. Okay? The agents care about money, and not only that we care about money in a linear fashion. Okay? So that means that if we get £1,000. Or we get £2,000, right? £2,000 gives us twice as much utility as £1,000. Now, you think, well, that's obvious, surely, but it's not true, right? So there's a lot of models that say that people's preferences for money are actually concave, right? So the risk aversiveness, so the kind of theories about risk aversiveness. So a lot of, there's theorem that says this is the amount of money, and my utility for money is not a straight line, it goes something like this. Okay? So the more money